Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we pick the right topics, get the right guests. We ask them the relevant questions on issues that matter to you. And we have a big show for you tonight as the year begins to unfold. We're looking into the 2024 crystal ball to find out what are the possible twists and turns ahead of the year, what are the big things we can predict, and what are the things we cannot be so sure of. My guest organized a big conference for the African continent, about 30 countries, and he made some interesting predictions. We'll be quizzing him on some of those when we come back. So tonight we're looking into the crystal ball for 2024, a year that's begun very interestingly. My guest is the founding and managing partner of AB & David, a Pan-African law firm that organized a big event a few days ago, hosting delegates from all over the continent, looking at the business and economic outlook for the year. David has been doing these crystal ball conferences for the past 10 years, and as has become our custom on The Point of View, we bring him in at the beginning of the year to look into the crystal ball and tell us what's going to happen. David, it's good to have you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Bernard.
How has the year started for you?
Well, steady, but I mean progressing, and I think we're taking one day at a time.
Congrats, you've done crystal ball for 10 years.
Yes.
When you started, did you know it would become this big?
No, the first event had only about 14 people there. Yeah, but it's grown and it's become across the border. Yeah.
And I like the fact that it's intelligence and business analysis and economic analysis across the continent. It's not just a Ghana thing. You try and, even in the predictions, look at what all the global developments mean for Africa. Why is this important?
I mean, businesses, we are a business law firm to begin with, and by way of correction, I'm not the managing partner, I'm the senior partner.
Senior partner?
Yeah, the senior partner. So we are a business law firm, and we advise clients from across the globe who are either working or intending to do some investments in Africa. And you have to have some form of social responsibility, even as a law firm. And one of the things we do is to draw their attention to not just legal issues and policy issues, but from what we see as a business law firm, what we think may impact on their business in one way or the other. So we do that, and for our clients, we do it more in depth. But for Crystal Ball, which brings everybody together, it's not an event for only our clients, for friends, for stakeholders in the business community. We take a look at the broader global spectrum and look at the events trending in the entire globe, but with a focus on what it means for Africa. And also remember that every business does strategy at the beginning of the year, normally at the end of the year, and implement at the beginning of the year. And that's why Crystal Ball is always at the beginning of the year. What it is that you should be taking a look at if you had not taken a look at it, and how it may impact on your business and your strategy for the year.
How have these predictions been received? I ask because in speaking to some people, they feel like Ghanaian in particular, businesses, even though they claim they want data, they don't really take data-driven decisions. They like emotion. Some of them use anecdotal evidence. And if they have to pay, so they'll say, we want the data, but if they have to pay. So for example, in my field, a company used to do monitoring of media and was generating reports. An American company, they had to fold up because they said they were not getting enough people in the continent willing to pay for those insights. So what are your thoughts around people's interest in this, I call it business intelligence and sort of thing, and their willingness to actually pay for it?
But that's true. What you have said is true. But one responsibility of any good business, and we believe we are quite a good business, is to also change society. You are not just there to make the money. And that's actually the ethos of Crystal Ball. We must change how we perceive things, how we do things. I mean, one of the problems we suffer from as a continent is where we have moved into the formal secular society, but at the same time behaving in a very informal, very traditional society. That dichotomy affects us in many ways. But when it comes to businesses, you cannot but do things formally, and a business cannot be planning a strategy based on spiritual prophecy. It must take a look at data and use data as a basis for. So yes, when we started, that's what I said, when we started, there were 14 people. at that event that we were at, there were about 500 people who are now interested in, and they come every year. And by the end of the day, they stay, listen to it. And again, Bernard, it's not just doing the predictions. As you notice, we have a lot of sessions, and these sessions discuss specific sectors. And those sectors, players in the business in those sectors, take it very, very seriously. And there are many people who call us into their boardroom to ask our views as to what we think about the plans they are doing. And let me say one more thing, which is very, very a critical piece of crystal ball. And I think I took a short scan about a few countries. We actually look at what are the legislations which are going to impact businesses in the ensuing year. And that insight may enable you as to what to plan, what taxes are emerging, what should you be focusing on, and things like that. Yeah.
So you talk about the business realities, like the taxes that are coming. You said something that quite caught my attention. You say businesses cannot strategize based on spiritual prophecy.
Yeah.
There are some prophecies that come to pass, though. So how different is what you do from a prophecy then?
I mean, the prophecies that come to pass, I cannot speak to them. I'm not a prophet. But those prophecies, if you notice, are about individuals, mainly.
They could also be about trends. They could also be about, I've heard people prophesy about famines. There's prophecy about wars. There's prophecy about global events. So it's not just personal prophecy. But that's not the point of today's show.
I understand.
Yeah.
But those people, at least they make a claim to have spoken to God. I don't make such claim.
Okay.
What it is that I look at trends. In fact, there are three factors I use in my predictions.
Okay.
But again, let me emphasize that crystal ball is not just a prediction event. The prediction is just the last session.
Yeah.
It's an event that looks at various sectors. And as you know, one of the sectors, for example, we dealt with this year, which attracted a lot of attention, was the two regulations the EU has passed, which may affect exports to the EU. And we brought two people from Brussels who actually made presentations on this and how to go around it. So those are in-depth things that you need to deal with, right? Now, the difference between what we do and prophecy is that you can see maybe it's a policy, you can see that there's a trend, and we go ahead to tell you what you can do about it. It's not based on something we have not seen. It doesn't mean that prophets don't have a role to play.
So you are not living by faith, you live by sight.
No, I live by faith too, in my personal life and even in the business life.
Okay.
But I'm not having any spirit speaking to me.
Okay.
So, and I was trying to tell you the factors.
The three factors.
Yeah, the three factors that we use for this. The first factor is the trend.
Okay.
And we watch trends a lot in all sectors. The second factor is history. And history is a very important part of what may happen in the future. There's a cycle in history. And again, at times, history guides us in a way as to how to depart from the mistake that was made. The last one is a hunch. And that hunch is things based on our experience. What your collection of your experiences are telling you that of all the diverse events happening, this is what perhaps you must focus on. And of course, our success rate in this is quite high, as you know.
At the threshold of an emerging new era is the theme for 2024. What do you mean by that? So
the theme for the crystal ball event itself was one continent, one market. So that, and going beyond borders, that's for but the message, which is what you are talking about, because at Crystal Ball Africa, we always give out a document. And it's not, again, I'm sure you have a copy of the document in front of you. The first part sets out a message and gives you a plethora of things happening and what you should focus on. Now, when we look at the plethora of things happening, again, for example, last year, the magazine we gave us was simply titled Africa's New Blue Ocean, right? Because there were a lot of unoccupied areas that we thought people should be looking at. This year, we say you are at the threshold of an emerging new era, because there are so many things happening that from our experience, between 2025 2026, a new era is going to emerge that will change the business ecosystem entirely. And we are at the threshold. So the new era has not started, but we are at the threshold. And this is the best time for you to look at it and see how do you position yourself entering into the threshold.
Wonderful. There are, I think, 12 or 13 key things you looked at.
Yes.
So let's start with the first one. You said this 2024 will be a year where economic stability will be the focus. Is this globally or for Africa?
Globally, incidentally, globally. And I think it's, I mean, just take a look at what happened in 2023. Most economies were fighting inflation. Even the big boys were all looking at inflation, and there's been a lot of talk as whether there's going to be a recession, soft landing, and all that. Everybody has been worried, and that's why the Fed, for example, in the US, had been inching up on monetary policy rates. I think we should have a different strategy in Africa anyway when it comes to monetary policy. But everybody is concerned about, I mean, economic stability. And of course, this is the post-effect of the COVID. In Africa, it's even worse, and normally, generally the global south, because of the COVID effect on the economy. So Ghana, for example, has to now deal with debt exchange and all those kind of things. So that flow from 2023 on the economy is going to be a key factor, and that was my number one pick throughout 2024.
And that you said taxes were going to be very critical.
Taxes,
for most countries and governments.
Yes, taxes. I mean, it's going to be, and again, in the areas to focus on. I touched on what countries are doing, because generally, in order to ensure stability, the economic policies have to deal with various things, number one of which is taxes. So I gave the example of Ghana, where new taxes have been introduced, including taxes in the lottery business, for example, which used not to exist, taxes relating to wins. I mentioned the example of Malawi, where a tax on advanced import tax is being imposed.
Advanced import tax.
Yeah.
They tax you before the import comes in.
Well, yes.
Governments are desperate for money.
Well, there is a general talk about tax to GDP ratio across Africa, and you will notice that a lot of these countries are also undergoing one form of IMF program or the other, and therefore they need to put all these kind of measures in place, and taxes are, but they are not all imposition of taxes. There are some ones which vary. If you take a look at Nigeria's case, for example, where the question of there has been relaxation on the capital gains regarding gains of disposals in the oil and gas sector, or you take the case of Cote d'Ivoire, where the date from which you calculate the VAT input has been changed from the date of issue of VAT invoice to the date when the VAT is collected, which gives businesses a certain amount of breather. So the point I'm making is all the policies that center around taxes and more are going to be a key determinant factor on how the economic stability goal of governments are attained.
And we are seeing this in Ghana. There's a 5% turnover tax, and there's also now some conversation about VAT on power,
exactly,
which has dominated the early parts of the economic discussion.
Exactly. So you have to look at those taxes and focus, and businesses must be looking at what taxes are coming, what taxes can they take advantage of, which of them is going to burden them more, and if you overlook it, and for example you don't pay attention to the budget statement, and when the taxes are operationalized, you may be adopting a strategy which is based on mere prophecy. So this is real data of what we need to pay attention to.
Oh, and of course, inflation has been a big discussion globally from, I think, late 2022. The US Fed hiking their rates affected all countries.
Yeah, it's not slowing down.
But it appears as though inflation will still be an issue in 2024.
It will be an issue, and I did mention that except for countries like China is not suffering any inflation for that matter. And remember, China did the reverse of actually lowering their policy rates instead of increasing it. Turkey did the same, except that Turkey is still having inflation. So it all depends on the context within which you find yourself. But inflation is going to be an issue. And for the US in particular, because of the election, that's one of the major areas they are looking at. But for me, you should look at inflation in Africa from a different point. When inflation goes up by half a notch from 3% to 4%, or from 8 to 9%, the global West gets very worried. And here we are talking about going as far as into the 50s and now inching down to the 30s and trending downwards. But even on the African continent, there are those who are doing about 19.
So we should be contextual in looking at inflation.
Exactly.
Ghana is a high inflation environment, so our numbers are bigger.
It is. And the other thing that goes with inflation is the borrowing rate. Because, for example, the Kenyans were in the streets when the monetary policy was going up to about 13%. But here we were in the 20s, and at the same time with inflation, and people were okay. So it depends on the context of the environment.
The second big thing you look at is BRICS. So initially we call Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
So it's actually BRICS Plus, and BRICS I put the chart on there.
So what is BRICS Plus, and why is it going to be a big issue in 2024?
BRICS Plus, because the BRICS was expanding, and in 2023 I had talked about the potential expansion, and that did happen when they met in South Africa, admitting new countries which include the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Iran, Ethiopia, and Egypt. Yeah.
So those are the 6. UAE, Saudi, Argentina, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Iran.
Yeah, and Iran. Adding and therefore making the block bigger. There was a whole issue about whether the name should change or not. They decided to
BRICS Plus.
Yeah. But the reason why it's a place to watch this year is because the admission of the new members actually starts from January. So even though they were admitted last year, their membership starts from this year. The other thing has to do with de-dollarization. The BRICS are centered around a lot on de-dollarization, and you will see that the reliance on the dollar has actually, as a currency reserve, has trended downwards. The last time I checked, it was around 50% thereabouts. It used to be
70.
As high as 90 years ago. So the other thing that's important with the BRICS is the fact that they have been introducing increasingly among the BRICS members the ability to exchange goods and services using local currency without necessarily going through the US dollar, which, I mean, that doesn't mean the dollar is going to collapse, not at all. But it shows that the ecosystem is changing, and a business person needs to look at it. If you are dealing more with a BRICS country, you may be surprised. As an example, and remember we were talking about Africa, Egyptian pound now can be exchanged for the Russian ruble in terms of exchange of goods, which indirectly makes Egypt's currency a convertible currency.
Even in Africa, the PAPs, a lot of the banks advertise the Pan-African payments. So now I send money to Zambia, CDs, and they get kwacha without going
in real time.
So that suggests that the global dollar dependence is going to go down. Maybe there are future implications for the effect of the dollar on other economies, because as I said to you, our currency depreciation was largely due to the way people depend on the dollar.
Also, when it comes to Ghana, we think in dollars. I mean, we may not admit that openly. You go to some shops, you ask for the cost of an item, and they scan it and they tell you the price. It's fixed in dollars. I mean, I don't know how Bank of Ghana is going to deal with that. For me, I think the dollar issue in this country is more of a psyche issue than any other. I mean, just go across Togo.
People don't think like that.
People don't think in terms of the dollar. I mean, I was just speaking to Zambia yesterday about property rates on behalf of a client that we are dealing with there. And every property is quoted in kwacha. But here it doesn't happen.
Everything is dollars.
Yeah, everything is dollars. So we think in dollars. I think the government even thinks in dollars.
Yeah.
So that's one of the challenges, and that's why BRICS Plus is interesting. The other thing about BRICS Plus is the fact that there's the new bank, the new development bank, which is a BRICS bank. They have incidentally just after the crystal ball done their first major infrastructure deal in India for $500 million. They are very far away from rivaling the likes of the World Bank and the IFCs of this world, but that's how things start small and can grow big. So,
and if you look at the 6 new entrants, it seems as if Iran with their oil and UAE with their new attraction as the center of business, and of course Saudi as well, which is interesting because Iran and Saudi are not necessarily the best of friends in terms of
somehow China has managed to begin to get them to establish diplomatic relations with each other now. And remember that the BRICS together control now 46% to 49%
of global GDP,
of global population, and about approximately 30% of global GDP. So it's not a block you can completely, I mean, and remember, what is the reason for Ethiopia's membership? Ethiopia's economy is an economy to watch for several reasons, because its light manufacturing is gradually trending very, 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 very much. And much more so, we overlook the fact that it's Africa's second largest in terms of population, I think. So they are a significant player in entering that block. And being part of East Africa, which the block where Congo DR has just entered and Somalia has entered, is an entry to the eastern part of Africa.
What surprises me is how the mint, you know, when BRICS came, there was
Mexico,
Indonesia, Nigeria, how
Turkey,
that hasn't really caught on. And I was thinking that if there was somebody going to join BRICS, it would have been them. But it appears that didn't really work out.
I think I've made the statement before that in life, being ahead is not as important as continuing to remain ahead when others are catching up. I think the problem with the Mint was that they couldn't constitute themselves into a bloc. And because BRICS has constituted itself into a bloc, created a bank, and remember, this is being driven a lot also by China and Russia, and they attempt to create a new multipolar system. And this year's BRICS summit will be held in Russia. Remember, Putin was not at the South Africa summit, but this is his hometown. He's going to be there.
Very interesting. Let's talk about the third one quickly. Growth will be driven still from the east. So this is something you're saying that you said this in the past, and it's going to continue. This is point number 3.
It's going to continue, and even more important now, because of one factor I mentioned, that's India. And I think I mentioned India also for another specific reason. India is going to overtake China for the first time in terms of GDP growth in the course of the year. And once India, and remember, India is 1.4 billion, they're 17% of the population of the world, and they are the type of growth that India is experiencing is quite significant. A lot of their businesses are beginning to go global, similar to what the Chinese did, and it's attracting quite a lot of FDIs. Then you have the whole Indonesia growth. President Widodo is not eligible for re-election, but they are going for election this year. The Indian factor also has to take into account the Singapore factor. A lot of Indian businesses have a Singapore hub, for want of a better word. That gives you a big entry into the ASEAN market and to tap into the entire financial sector in Singapore. So India and China together, 34% of the world population, and the two countries both growing almost neck to neck, makes a growth shift more to the east.
Will India's new growth have any impact on Africa?
A lot, especially for Indian businesses, and that's one group of one country whose businesses have perhaps known Africa much longer
than even China.
Yes, especially if you take aside the colonial powers. They've been here forever, even during the colonial
over
days.
Hundreds of years, actually. Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, Liberia.
Even during the colonial days, the Indian businesses were next to the European businesses. So they've been around for a very long time.
So they know the continent.
Yes, especially East, Southern, West Africa. And it may become the new hub for businesses which are able to take advantage of the after, to be able to trade on many of the countries within the Africa market region.
We'll talk about part 2 of this third point later, where we talk about China, the year of the dragon, and what that means, and China's reopening, and what that also means for Africa. But crystal ball is what we are looking into. It's a different kind of discussion. My guest, David Ofosu-Dorte, who is the founding partner, I should say, of AB. And David, stay with us. Welcome back to The Point of View. Tonight, my guest, David Ofosu-Dorte. We're looking into the crystal ball for 2024. What kind of year will it be? So far, we've heard a few things. It's the threshold of an emerging new era. Key issues, macro stability will be very key across the world. BRICS Plus will play a very key role in the way the world works. Economic growth will be driven from the East. India, for the first time, will grow faster than China. But there's also a second point around this economic growth from the East thing. The fact that China is reopening. What was your point around that?
I think there was quite a lot of talk about when China was going to reopen after the COVID. They finally reopened, and what I said is that China didn't just reopen, it also opened up. And that's a part that has not been talked about, especially in mainstream media. It's just like China has opened, but China is really opening up. Not only did they overtake US last year in FDIs, and that's an important part, the fact that they are opening up and attracting more foreign investors is something to watch when it comes to Africa. Almost every single major of the Fortune 500 CEOs were in China at some point last year or the other, and a lot of heads of states. I mean, as we speak, you have 2 heads of states from the Caribbean already in China this year. And that trend is going to continue. Now, when they are opening up and they attract foreign direct investors, it means that Africa as an alternative market may not be receiving as much FDIs as one would expect, especially when people are looking for new markets.
So when you say they are opening up, are you saying they are relaxing their investment laws?
Making it easier for foreign investors to come in.
So it's a deliberate policy.
Deliberate policy, including also creating visa-free arrival for 15 countries. I mean, and they say they are going to expand it. So they are not even just looking at setting up tourism. They are also boosting tourism. And so they are taking a different approach. Remember, China has experienced a little increase in unemployment. And so like any other country, they are worried about it. And they are creating openings for employment too. And again, I'm sure we will return to China when it comes to energy transition.
Actually, the fourth point is where this China thing is, where you're saying this energy transition thing, China will benefit more than even the West.
Far more. It's already beginning to show. I mean, they had a right strategy. And just before we come to that, this is the year of the dragon. And for the Chinese, the year of the dragon is more of a bullish approach to doing things. So those
as against the year of the rabbit last year.
Yes, against the year of the rabbit. The rabbit is a wise animal.
So the dragon is fearless.
More bullish, fearless.
So this is China's year.
Yeah, so that's and compared to 2012, when they last had the year of the dragon. So you have to look at it from. I told you, history plays a role in the prediction I make.
Okay.
So I took a look at.
So what China did in 2012, you think some of it will be repeated in 2024?
Because it shows the psyche of the people, and it shows the kind of policies that will be rolled out.
So this is the year of the dragon.
Yeah.
They're going for it. The red dragon.
Now let's take a look at the energy transition. China did so much investments in batteries.
Yes.
That I think was not noticed. Currently, it's estimated by an organization called Mineral Intelligence that by 2030, China will have 69% of the entire global battery capacity.
Wow.
Even as at 2024, according to The Economist, China actually has 3 times more battery capacity than they need on the mainland.
Wow.
Which means that they can actually supply much more. What does it mean? It means we must take a second look at how we approach the lithium story. Because if China is producing more batteries, and they are buying power at a lesser rate, at a cheaper rate to produce, and their interest rate is not as high as that of Africa, it means that even if you were producing batteries here, the Chinese batteries are likely to be cheaper if they are exporting it here. So it doesn't mean we should stop producing batteries from lithium. It means we must take that factor into account in strategizing and perhaps look at how we can bring the cost of production down.
So you're saying China will even control battery production in the West?
Yes,
so because it's not just in China.
No, because a lot of and that is where Mineral Intelligence get the 69% from. Because a lot of the factories in France, Italy, and Spain, which are producing batteries, are either owned by Chinese or partially controlled by Chinese. They took the technology. Let me give you another example, which I talk about when it comes to China. It has to do with the BYD and the fact that BYD has overtaken Tesla in terms of EV vehicles. It really is selling several times more than Tesla. But there's a fact which is fairly overlooked. Why is BYD able to do that? BYD, the price of the average BYD vehicle is about $22,000. You have to check this factor. Whilst that of an average Tesla vehicle, EV, is about $40,000, kind of. So that's about half of Tesla. It's possible because BYD produces almost all its inputs. Currently, about 75% of all the inputs, including the battery, is made by BYD itself. So the vertical integration has helped it. Whereas the average vehicle manufacturer in the West outsources a lot, and the Tesla is high.
They are building like the way they build traditional cars. While BYD has found a way of producing all the components together.
But Tesla was able to succeed because they were also doing Tesla is doing about 65% of its inputs, but BYD is doing about 75%, which gives it more advantage. So those factors have to be taken into account.
You said by end of this year, BYD will be the leading EV manufacturer.
So there are two things. They are already the leading.
So they'll be the leading car manufacturer.
China will be the leading car manufacturer, but BYD is already the leading EV manufacturer. So China is already the leading EV manufacturers in the world already as at now. And I'm saying by the end of the year, they will be the leading vehicle car manufacturers also in the world.
Your fifth point is about EU and the UK. I remember there was a year you said that May will be out by June. That was so funny. And it actually happened when Theresa May's challenges. I think UK has not recovered from Brexit at all. What's your main point about EU and the UK in 2024?
This is something that has a major impact on Africa because I think it is fairly misunderstood. Because we take it for granted that the conditions in the EU and UK are the same. I think they are more worried than we are. Very, very worried. I mean, and for several reasons. One is the fact that not only is China far ahead of all of them in terms of the economy size, EU indirectly depends on China now for trade. China is actually the largest trading partner of the EU by far. I mean, then you come to the fact that Britain also left the EU, making it so
both of them are weaker.
It weakens the EU and it weakens Britain itself. So that's factor number 2. Then you have, perhaps, in my view, the biggest worry that they have, which is the fear that Trump will return. And I'm sure you may be asking more questions about Trump. The Trump's return is more frightening to the European leaders, in my view, than it is to the Americans. And why is it so? You have Russia next door fighting in Ukraine. You've already lost the cheap oil and gas supplies from Russia. You have to find different resources. India is buying more gas from Russia, more energy from Russia than previously. And you are not at peace with Russia. Now, if you have a Trump in power who is not so much pro-NATO, you have a situation where you have much more...
Europe will be more isolated and feel less
much more to worry about. There's even a worse thing happening. The AfD, the far right in Germany, appears to be gaining grounds, 25%. And the more you have Finland already has a far right, having gone the majority in parliament. The more you have far right policies, the more likely people are to move away from the traditional structure of Europe.
But from an Africa perspective, you said that the EU-DR will affect Africa significantly because we export a lot of minerals, and they have come up with a new law.
So there are two things: the carbon market adjustments, which then trace exports in the areas of steel, aluminium, etc., as to the extent at which they affect the net zero and the whole energy transition. That I'm not so worried about it as much as I am on the carbon deforestation, the EU deforestation regulation. With that, exports are tracked to check the extent to which they affected deforestation. And that may lead to either imposition of sanctions or some more fines. And we had a whole session on that. And already there are reports that in coffee exporters in Ethiopia are beginning to suffer as a result of that. But the category of goods that are affected by that includes cocoa, coffee, cashew, which should be a very big source of worry for countries like Ghana. So it's an area to watch. So for
commodity exporters like Ghana, this EU-DR could mean that the volume of cocoa we even sell will be much, much lower.
Not necessarily. It means that our exports may be sanctioned if it is traced that...
And the sanction will be in form of tariffs.
It could be tariff, or it could be a total a temporary ban. And it's going to affect you if the exports are traced to have affected or caused deforestation. But I'm not even hoping that there's going to be or expecting a ban. What it means is that it will cost exporters more to be able to comply with the regulation. And the cost of exports is going to increase.
Let's talk about point number 6, US. As we speak, as we call this program, Ron DeSantis is out of the Republican race.
He just dropped out.
And we are told that it's now basically Trump versus Nikki Haley. It's looking very likely that Trump will win the Republican ticket. Your analysis on the US was a bit interesting. You said essentially that if Trump is on the ticket,
they also favor him.
But you seem to think that because of the myriad of court cases he has,
about 8 or so,
that could prevent him from getting on the ticket. Can you elaborate on that point?
I think the Republican Party is facing a lot of challenges just because of the number of cases that Trump is facing. But the structure of American system still makes it possible for Trump to be able to win the election, notwithstanding all those court cases. I think a lot depends on whether one of those trials could prevent him from being on the ticket. And it's too early. The jury is still out. It's too early to make that judgment. Even though if you ask me to put a hunch, I don't think so. I think he will be on the ticket, and that alone causes a fair bit of the stir. That is why.
So because of the apparently overwhelming nature in which he's winning the Republican primary.
No. Remember, the predictions came before DeSantis stepped down, and at that time, everybody thought initially it was a DeSantis and a Trump race. Then, from nowhere, Nikki Haley moved up. If New Hampshire happens today, and Nikki Haley doesn't win, that's a big base. If she doesn't win today, the race is over.
That's what I'm saying. So, if Trump wins the Republican primary, you think that it's less likely that the 8 court cases will prevent him from going on the ticket?
Yes.
Because once he's been chosen by the party, even if he loses some of the cases, it may not affect his ability to run.
The question is not a loss. The question is whether any of the cases will lead him to being jailed
for a significant time enough to prevent him from running.
Yes, and whether a jail sentence will necessarily prevent him from running.
Yeah.
There are 2 questions that pundits have not been able to
answer. On the legal side or on the practical side?
On the legal side.
Because in Ghana, we had somebody in jail win elections. Kwame Nkrumah was in prison and won an election.
So the issue in America, I'm not sure about what the law says, but all the people I have listened to, the experts on this subject, say that doesn't prevent him from.
So he could actually be jailed and still run for it?
From what I understand. But the point here about Trump is that if he remains on the ballot, and I said if, and they go to the convention in Milwaukee in July, once that convention endorses him, Biden will look weaker. So
if Trump is on the ticket for November, you were supposed to bet, you would say he would beat Biden.
I'll bet on Trump. And remember that in 2020 I said Trump was going to lose. You are the
crystal ball. You said he was a one-term president.
Yes, and there was somebody in the crowd who said no, and he was ready to go on a bet. But Trump lost. Of course, it doesn't mean I'm a prophet. My hunch worked. I think that if he's on the ballot, Bernard, let me explain why this Trump, the fact that his ability to win is almost certain. In 2015, Trump was fighting the Republican establishment.
Mm-hmm.
I think in 2020 and now, Trump is the establishment. He is the establishment. You either have to be with him or the whole thing will come against you. DeSantis was the last person I expected to support Trump if he stepped down. But that's what he's done.
Florida governor. Interesting. So let's look at point number 7. Summer Olympics, France, Paris, and you said there was some nostalgia there. So apparently it's 100 years something.
Yes, 1924 the Olympics was in France as well. So we are back in France after 100 years. I mean, the only point I threw that in for fun because it's news everybody is going to be following, and it will take attention away from the tension in the world.
But where is France's place in the world now?
Strong in Europe after Germany in terms of size of economy, and also leading Europe in terms of its ability to, as it were, stimulate the policies that enable Europe to continue to assert itself. But for as an African, I think France's place is the fact that it still holds a significant sway over the Francophone countries.
But if you look at the coups that happened and the behavior of Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, all the new coup leaders seem to be taking an anti-France position, which is very popular in their populace. Do we see this as an unraveling of France-Africa strategy?
Well, again, I think it's early days yet. Mali and Niger issued a joint statement, I think in September or so, indicating that they were going to break away from the so-called colonial accord. That requires a certain period of notice. But the statement that came in the media said that the notice was not going to be issued. But remember, we also had the ECOWAS issue where President Tinubu, then fresh, threatened on behalf of ECOWAS they were going to invade Niger,
we haven't seen anything
which never was. I don't think it's going to happen. In the outlook, I do mention that. And the French ambassador finally had to leave Niger, and Niger announced that they've increased the prices of uranium and all that. So the French hold.
France is weaker in Africa than it was maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, but it's not over. I think what is happening is a trend that if I were France, the earlier they take the step to revise their policy towards Africa, the better. But I think all these things is just a matter of time.
The final point before we take a short break is global energy and critical minerals. Are you suggesting that what gold and diamond used to be 10 years ago will now be nickel, cobalt, and lithium?
No,
that's not what you're saying.
I actually said critical minerals will trend, but gold prices will still remain very high. And the reason, again, goes back to the BRICS Plus. Any attempt to de-dollarize, no matter how much you may want to have an alternate currency, a lot of people will continue watching gold as the fallback to go to. So gold prices will remain high, even though a lot of trend will be going more towards the critical minerals. And copper and lithium are my main bet. But of course, cobalt of course. So a lot of African countries will be focusing on discovery of lithium. Nigeria's now has a solid minerals policy, of which lithium is a critical part. I believe that probably African countries ought to be thinking about how to have a collective production of batteries out of lithium, because quite a number of countries have lithium, and quite a number of them are trending towards not exporting it in this raw form. But
you also said that COP28, which happened in UAE, and COP29 will have an influence on these issues.
Yes, because COP29 is happening in Azerbaijan. The interesting thing about the COP is that for the first time, especially COP28, things have changed. You have a situation where not only 132 countries are signing up to it, but more importantly, many of the countries, the targets that they have set are what is called near-term targets. It's very, very important. These are 2030 targets. If I should take Ghana as an example, the transition target is 2060, 30 years after the near-term targets. And some of them are doubling battery capacity, a number of things. They're moving faster towards net zero. There are countries which are beginning to think about banning diesel vehicles from 2025. I think India is one of them. Yeah. So the trend is moving faster than expected. And there is, let me point out the most important thing for Africa here. Any trend changes form once money appears on the table.
Okay.
The energy transition, the green transition, COP28, all this COP has now become a money issue. In fact, the COP conferences is a better place to find money now than in many other places. Yes. Once money is on the table and people are now doing carbon exchanges and all that, you see that much more attention is paid there, which is what makes the story in China different. Because you find out that China actually put in so much money in this sector that is able to drop the prices of climate-friendly production. And once you can sell it at a cheaper rate, investors begin to look at that sector. And if Africa is still focused on hydrocarbons, we may be attracting less and less funding for the industrialization we are targeting.
We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the big issue of elections. Now, can you guess how many elections globally will happen in 2024? Can you guess how many of them will happen in Africa? Of course, you know Ghana is voting. The numbers are outstanding, astounding. When we come back, David will get into the election crystal ball as we get further into the 2024 outlook. Stay with us. Welcome back. The point of view tonight is talking to David Ofosu-Dorte, founding partner, AB and David. We're looking into the 2024 crystal ball. Fascinating comments. My favorite slide is always the election slide. You know, and I don't know. You say how many elections are happening this year globally?
70 globally.
70 elections?
70 if you add the rules for parliamentary, etc.
That's 1/3 of the countries in the world.
Yeah, that's about 1/3 of the countries in the world. And remember, I even made a prediction that Britain may go for the elections earlier than predicted. The elections are supposed to be 2025. It may be called in 2024. So it's one of the wild cards that you need to look at.
That's serious. If you have 1/3 of the countries voting, then there's going to be a leadership shift.
And that is why I said we are at the threshold of a new era. You have a major point in our life where by 2025, about 1/3 of the leaders have either changed or changed their ministers. Even if the same leader retains power, they've changed their ministers. South Africa, for example, is going for election. I expect Ramaphosa to win. But it means that a new cabinet will come up.
And in Africa, the elections are 15.
15. And again, on the presentation I made, I showed the elections in 2023 and showed the 2025. The reason is that half the continent are either at elections or will be having elections by next year.
Because if you have the 15 for this year, you have the 6 or so for last year, and about 3 for next year. That's about 30.
Yeah, that's about half of the continent having elections over this 3 year
So the
period.
continent is also going to experience a shift in leadership.
Just like the rest of the world. Yeah.
Which of these are most critical? Let's look at 2024. South Africa is big. If you look on the red list, Ghana is obviously there.
South Africa, Senegal
is critical.
Will be the 2 critical ones. The rest...
Why is Senegal more important than Ghana?
Because the question is still not answered as to whether Macky Sall is going to go for a 3rd term or not.
And the way the opposition is being treated as well. So it looks like their democratic journey will face a stronger test.
Yes, similar to that of Cote d'Ivoire. Yeah.
Ours is not as critical in the sense that people know that in Ghana we manage elections pretty well. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but it's also critical because it's the 2nd term of the president. He's not eligible for a 3rd term. So if you notice, I think I showed a slide of...
We'll come to that. Yeah. I was just saying in terms of when you said South Africa and Senegal are the ones to watch.
Yes,
because of the issues around them.
No, not necessarily the issues. I already predicted Ramaphosa is going to win.
Yeah.
Because of the size of South Africa's economy in Africa.
Okay.
You want to watch what happens on that, in that country. But Macky Sall for a different reason, because whether he's going to go for a 3rd term.
Because Senegal is not such a big economy.
In West Africa, it plays a significant role. It's not about the size of the economy. It's the link to France, together with Cote d'Ivoire. They are the 2 countries that are quite significant when it comes to France's role in West Africa.
What about a country like Algeria's election or Rwanda? Or because we know the outcome?
No, it's not because Paul Kagame is extremely popular on that. So the rest, because I'm not expecting any significant change, I don't expect that it will have a very major impact on the ecosystem of businesses. Remember, these predictions are all focused on how it affects the ecosystem of business.
So how did Tinubu's victory, how will it change? He won last year. Same party, different guy. If you look at Tinubu for the first half year, is there a different trajectory, and what does that mean for the continent?
I've said this before. Frankly, a change within the same party is often more intense in terms of what it brings than when the change is in a different party. Watch the trend very well. In fact, even in Ghana, I can tell you a change of minister at times causes so much disruption and changes than the change of government itself. So a change within the same party doesn't really mean that businesses should pay less attention to the change that is happening. Yeah.
So has Tinubu shown enough to suggest that he's different from Buhari?
Well, I wouldn't say different from Buhari, but look at what he's done with the central bank. I just talked about the fact that he has also relaxed even the capital gains tax in the oil and gas sector. He's really done a lot which is far different from Buhari, from how I understand. I mean, the events in Nigeria.
What's the Nigeria space?
Yes. And he's still on my list of people to watch in Africa.
We'll come to that. But the Ghana election, you don't really like predicting Ghana elections, but you put up a slide which showed the 2 leading candidates, the rebel and then the unexpected newcomer. What are you doing here?
What I'm basically saying is that a lot of candidates who pop up, some who want to be independent, etc., but these are the 4 that hit me. The unexpected newcomer, because he's a businessman, but it will be, if you ask me, not too different from that of Peter Obi. A stare, but he's not going to win Ghana's presidential election. That I can predict. But
what effect will the rebel have on the incumbent?
I think the rebels, so far what I see is quite a lot of campaign in the Ashanti region, not outside Ashanti region. I haven't seen much. Probably it's early days yet, and therefore let me say that before June, it's very difficult to predict how it will go. But I think the real race is between the two.
And then you said that the 3 factors that will determine who wins is what?
It's taxes, power, as in electricity, and then the economy. And
taxes, power, and the economy.
Yeah, I think those are the three factors. You know, people determine how to vote mainly from how they feel at a certain point in time. And I think these are the three factors which will determine it. But don't rush to draw a conclusion. There's a reason. Remember, Ghana has returned to the top 10 of GDP growth. I mentioned that as well. It's a factor that is often overlooked. So you may not call it turn the corner or not turn the corner. I don't want to go into those political semantics. The point is that the economy will be much more stable than it was in 2022 and 2023. And at times, people change their mind as a result of how the economy performs. The area
because the sentiment now is the economy is not doing well.
Yes.
And most of the polls you see put the opposition leader ahead.
And
generally.
Exactly. And because you have the fact that you have the return to growth of close to 3%, it may, I mean, depending on how the economy performs. The power sector, because of the debt that is owed to the IPPs.
The low-key doom so people are frustrated about.
Exactly. And it's out of frustration. People get frustrated.
And then a lot of indirect taxes as well. So those are the three key drivers. How they behave this year
is what will determine.
Well, at least we know what taxes are doing. So that one is easy to say.
So you can return to this after June.
We'll see. Hopefully we'll talk to you again. I wanted to jump point number 10. The new Cold War will continue. I think that's
but I remember that businesses should not watch this for emotional purposes. They should watch this in terms of how it affects them. So they should be watching what the politicians are saying, what they will come out in their manifesto, etc. That's what I want businesses to do.
Wonderful. So you said that the new Cold War will continue and the USA will have many battles to fight.
Too many.
All right. Maybe for a different day, I'll discuss US with you because I read a piece by a former agent of the CIA who said that all the conditions for civil war that they analyze in other countries seem to exist in the US.
It does.
And so he's very concerned about what will happen with the Trump issue.
You know, I actually said at the Crystal Ball that Trump's fear, the fear of Trump will heighten between August and October. But it's an issue which is being downplayed, but I don't think it will lead to a civil war. One of two things will happen, depending on if he becomes president. If he becomes president, the establishment as we know it
will change forever.
Will change for a very long time.
Wow. And if he loses...
If he loses, it will create a very, very heightened tension
situation in the country.
In the country.
Well, the point that I thought was interesting was when you said personalities who may change the business ecosystem. For the first time in a long time, I've seen a list of personalities influencing the world, and I don't see Elon Musk.
Yeah. He didn't make my list this year.
I was quite surprised. I mean, he owns Twitter.
Yeah,
he's still there with Tesla and SpaceX. I'm surprised.
No, he didn't make my list this year. This is my list. Remember, if I take a look at the pictures you see, you have Sam Altman there, OpenAI. AI is the new thing on the block. I mean, AI is going to trend and going to influence everything. He makes my list. The other guy on the top right is a guy that you should watch, Legua Sang. He's leading a startup in China called Seida. And he left Silicon Valley, high-paying job, to lead that startup. The interesting thing about it is that they are making microchips. And remember, America tried to, as it were, prevent the export of high-tech microchips to China. And if you have somebody from Silicon Valley leading a new startup there, he's the man to watch. The guy on the top left,
Taiwan's new leader.
Yeah, Lai Ching-te, leading the Kuomintang party, because he's anti-China. But the reason why he made my pick is because he only won 40% of the elections, and he has got 51 seats. Unfortunately, 2 of the independents sits on the side of the DPP.
Who support China?
Yeah, who support?
So
they are pro-China.
Pro-China, yes.
Yeah. So he may not be able to pass some of the laws, and the tension between China and
I see Ramaphosa, I see Tinubu, I see Guillaume Soro, and a few other people in
Soro and Tijani make my list because of the Ivory Coast elections, which is 2025. But the reason why they make my list is that the election will heighten in 2024. And both of them have given some hints that they may be contesting the election. I mean, Tijani is a mixed news. And Soros, because he was a speaker of the parliament and prime minister and broke away with
Ouattara. It's very interesting election. Of course, I see China's foreign minister, I see Netanyahu, and I see this Nigerian American.
China's foreign minister, Wang Yi, makes my list because he is reported to be pro-African. He just left Africa, and you have the G77 conference going on in Kampala. He is a man to watch when it comes to Africa. But, I mean, of all the Africans, I bet more on Adebayo.
He's almost like the new Warren Buffett.
Yes, I mean, because he did a quadrillion bet with the GIP, the global infrastructure, and made a big deal with Windrock. By the way, as late as yesterday, they were already talking to Nigeria on infrastructure deals. So he's the man to watch when it comes to Africa.
Nigerian. We'll leave it here. Thank you, David. We couldn't talk about Agenda 2063 and all of those, but thank you. This has been really mind-blowing. Thank you for watching. We'll be talking to David Ofosu-Dorte. Great insights. We wish you a great new year, and whoever wins the election, may Ghana win. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.